Today we're in San Juan Capistrano, which is just a couple miles inland from Dana Point and Laguna Beach. Now, if you're not familiar with San Juan Capistrano, it's all right. It's known for a couple of things. That would be where the swallows return every year from their migration. And it's also known for the mission, which is the third built mission in California, which was, I believe, established in 1776, making it pretty old for America's history. The first two were built in San Diego, California, and Oceanside, California. But we're not after that. We're after a different part of history today. In fact, I remember always hearing rumors about a little piece of forgotten history that I want to share with you today. The unfortunate thing is we actually have to get there first, which is way over there. So let's go on a little bit of adventure and let's have some fun, because today is the art of history. Here we go. All right, let's see how fast Ollie is. Race you to the top? Yeah. Ready, go. I'm gonna beat you. I'm gonna beat you. Loser. Oh. We won. I don't feel so good, but I won. All right, let's take off that hat here so that way you guys get to see more of my beautiful face. Let's talk about the history of this location that we're going to. You see, in 1920, there was a land developer that had this idea to transform Dana Point, which is just a couple of miles from here, into more or less a destination for the wealthy. Giant homes, beautiful scenery, close to the ocean. And to accommodate this new wealth and also attract them, there was two ideas proposed. He wanted to erect a giant sign to make it more luxurious and get a lot of publicity out there. Does that sound familiar? Yeah, it should. Sounds exactly like Hollywood land, which is now known as Hollywood, California. The other proposal was to build an airport, which began production and was opening in the 1930s. However, everything came to a screeching halt for the airport and the surrounding city's development. Something happened in 1939. Care to take a guess at what that small little event is? Yeah, you're right. It was World War II. And that's where our little piece of history begins. The forgotten history is something that I heard as a child all the time riding my bike around these locations in Southern California. You see, during World War II is when something was built right around this location. Now, I know it doesn't seem like much around here, but that's because it's not around us. It's actually right underneath our feet. Welcome to Helicopter Hill. All right, well, we finally got here, and it honestly doesn't look much like anything, but the real payoff is actually what's behind me. Are you ready?
Yes.
All right, let's do it. Let's go. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Faster, faster, faster. Okay, so what makes Helicopter Hill historical? Well, as I was growing up as a child, like I said, I heard so many stories about it. Fortunately, there's not much evidence to actually prove what there is through hard evidence, but I'm gonna take a shot in the dark. In 1939, since World War II was going on, we can safely assume that Helicopter Hill was established. And through the stories, it was actually known as an outpost to be a viewing point for incoming Japanese planes coming in through Dana Point Harbor. And that's where Helicopter Hill comes into play. You can still see the old helipad here, the lockdowns for anything that needed to be chained down on the helipad, plus the service roads that go down into what is now known as Marbella, which would lead towards Dana Point. But even more so, you have evidence of old military pillboxes that surrounded the sides of Helicopter Hill to protect it and even shoot incoming planes. And up until just maybe about a decade ago, you could actually go visit and hike and go inside those military pillboxes. However, with erosion, Mother Nature, and Father Time, They're all gone now, and unfortunately you can't see them, but they're still kind of small pieces of evidence that leads to those military pillboxes. And that's just the little bit of history of Helicopter Hill. Now, is it impressive? No, it's small, but as a child, seeing something like this and wandering around and having fun playing around here, it's super cool now to think as an adult. And as I'm here as an adult, it's kind of inspiring as an artist. So let's go around and see if we can find any fun pictures to take to get inspired. Okay, we're in the studio now, and I hope you enjoyed our little adventure to Helicopter Hill. Don't worry, more coming at the end of this video, but let's move on to our artwork of painting Helicopter Hill. To be honest, not really excited about painting Helicopter Hill. It's dry, it's barren, and there's not many layers to work with. So I'm gonna paint my version of Helicopter Hill using elements from those pictures in that day of our adventure. And two elements really stand out for me. The first one is the overcast that was on our day. In California, towards the Pacific Ocean on cold days, you get some really low hanging fog or overcast. The further inland you are, it burns off really quick like you can see on Helicopter Hill. But as you get closer to the Pacific Ocean down there, you can see all that sun that's hitting that low hanging overcast is diffusing across the land and the ocean and the hills, making everything be blown out and look extra distant because it creates a blurring effect. And I'm going to apply that to my painting here. The second element that I really liked is I think all the hills and valleys that collect towards the center point of the Pacific Ocean create a strong focal point for the eye. I find it pleasing even though it breaks the rule of thirds. And that's where we're going to start with our painting. I'm gonna block in the Pacific Ocean here with some ultramarine blue on our white base, which is really going to diffuse into the background here later in our painting. When it comes to creating the hills in our painting, I'm going to use an angle shader with a mixture of burnt sienna and a lot of titanium white. Remember, this is very far in the background, so I only want a little bit of color to show up. With the angle shader, it's really easy to sketch out and line in our hills that are gonna create a center point towards the Pacific Ocean. So I'm going to pull all of my hills in that general direction. And as they get closer to me, I'm gonna make them bigger and increase that angle that sweeps in towards the Pacific Ocean. To fill in my hills here, I'm just gonna use that same color and pull down with my angle shader and scratch in with a filbert brush to create the illusion of depth and also those diffused highlights. Since we have so much haze and glare and diffusion from our viewpoint of Helicopter Hill, that first layer of land that's closest to the Pacific Ocean, I'm just gonna blow it out. I'm just gonna add a little bit of trickle of color, and all I'm doing is zigzagging my hand back and forth and kind of creating a few swoops like a U or W, and I'm just gonna fade this in with a 2-inch brush because I really wanna push it back. The eye shouldn't be able to distinguish any detail here. Now, as we work closer with our hills and our valleys, I have to add slightly more detail, but I still want to create that haze look and that blown out effect from our photos and our adventure. And to do this, I'm just going to keep adding slightly more burnt sienna to our hillsides to create a stronger edge. But in the valleys there of those hills, I still want to leave that blown out effect because that's where all the light is catching and diffusing, not really allowing our eye to focus on it. And I want to keep that appeal. But as we also work closer, you're going to see slightly more detail with land and foliage. So I'm going to start adding in a little bit of a mixture between burnt sienna and sap green and work on different marbled variations of that. And feel free to put these wherever you want. And I'm just recreating the same effect. doing an outer edge as I pull down and fade and blend that in. And also on my lowland there in the center of the valley, just creating a few swoops and scratching everything in with a filbert brush. Remember, this is really, really far in the distance, so we don't have to have anything be a strong focal point here at the moment. When it comes to creating extreme depth in your painting, it's okay just to block in a few things with some color and scratch it in and diffuse it out, because your brain will kind of fill in the rest as long as it has a general shape. So don't spend too much time here. Literally free flow your hand and create some general shapes and colors and push it back in with a 1-inch or 2-inch brush, and trust me, your brain will do the rest. From here, I'm just going to create layer after layer after layer of hills and valleys. The only difference I'm really doing here is adding different mixtures. Now I'm gonna add more burnt sienna into my titanium white to make my hills stand out more, because as things get closer, they should be more bold and more detailed, but I still wanna leave that blurry effect. I'm also gonna start introducing into that mixture some sap green, because I want things to have a little more lush look to them, like there is a collection of maybe moisture that hits on the hills in certain areas. Plus I want it to look like all that water and condensation may collect on the lower lands. Thus, I'm gonna start adding in some sap green with burnt sienna, and also some sap green with just the littlest touch of phthalo blue to make it look like there's some more lush lands in certain areas. And if you're wondering what technique I'm using here, I'm actually just kind of going with basic shapes and designs. Don't be afraid to squint your eyes just a little bit to see how things kind of flow and feel. Have a free hand here, but don't forget to leave a little bit of space between each layer. For me, I'm leaving white because again, I want to recreate that diffusion look. Now, when we start working closer and closer towards our foreground, we need to introduce a little bit of detail. But remember, things are still extremely far, plus that diffusion of light is really making everything blurry. But I want to add just the slightest bit of detail, but not enough for us to decide what it is. Is it a bush? Is it a tree? We don't know. We're just going to add a little bit of detail, which is what I'm going to do in this bottom left-hand side. All I'm doing is just scratching in some bushes and trees and mixing them together with a filbert brush and scratching them, then going back and kind of stippling and pushing in just to add a little bit of texture. Not a lot. In fact, I'm actually going to blend some of this texture out with my 2-inch brush, just so that way it has a little bit of texture, but not much. Just enough for your eye to notice it, but not be distracting. All right, we're up to the hill and Helicopter Hill. And to be honest, I'm a little bit worried because I'm not good at painting dirt. So I'm gonna look at some of the pictures that I took. And when I look at them, Southern California is pretty much a desert. We have dirt, sand, rocks, and boulders. So in my mind, that means texture. I'm going to make my hill here have a nice strong base of burnt sienna that I'm going to outline here with a palette knife and really push in that color to my canvas with my brush. When it comes to creating the outline of your foreground, since things are gonna have more detail, you need to add some bumps and some jags. Remember, we're trying to make it dirt, so we need to add some imperfections into it, which is gonna be accentuated when we add our texture on here. To create texture, we're going to use a palette knife, and I'm going to start out with a mixture of 50% burnt sienna and 50% titanium white. Mix this together, but make sure you leave it a little bit marbly. So that way when you lay it on top of our hill here, it looks like the sun is creating different dimensions to it, which is really gonna add to the dirt and rock effect. Now I don't wanna lose the appeal of Helicopter Hill. So on my right side of my foreground, I'm gonna make more circular paths that look like it would drop down into that helipad section. On the left-hand side is the path that you would walk towards that circular section. Going to accentuate this by adding in a few cracks and crevices with a shadow color to really separate the two out. Once I've had that in place, I was really inspired by this plant that I took a picture of that had a beautiful mustard color to it. And I feel like since everything was super hot that day and the sun was right above us and there was no overcast, there was a lot more specular highlights. So I want to drop in a little bit of that mustard yellow here, which is just cadmium yellow mixed with a little bit of titanium white to really knock it down a little bit. And I'm going to add specular highlights where I think the sun is kissing my Helicopter Hill foreground. Now you have to admit, our painting's looking fantastic, but I'm going to finish it off by adding a little bit more to that haze effect because there was so much that day, and I think it's such a cool effect. I'm gonna step away from my painting for a couple of hours here and let it tacky up just a little bit. I come back with a 2-inch brush that I've dipped in to a little bit of Zinc White. The reason I'm using Zinc White is it's a little bit semi-transparent, and I'm going to tap where my Pacific Ocean is and work out in kind of a circular bloom and allowing that color to fade out all around my landscape and sky, adding to that visual appeal of that diffusion look. Once I have all the color in the spot where I want it, all I'm gonna do is just lightly cross stroke it in, adding a little bit of extra white and diffusing across my hills, my land, my valley, my sky, and even on top of my clouds. That's gonna create my strong center point in this painting, and I think it looks fantastic. I really loved working on this piece here. In fact, it was actually really challenging because I've never really tried to paint anything that had light diffusion on it. And I hope you guys appreciate this too. The one thing I really learned that I want you to take home is you don't need a lot of detail or definition to make an eye-grabbing piece. I mean, just look at the piece that we finished. Just a few simple lines and scratching in some color with a filbert and 2-inch brush, our brain fills in so much. It looks like we have beautiful hills that are leading towards the Pacific Ocean. It looks like we have a valley that has some wetlands and grasslands and lush foliage sitting there at the base and gets more lush as it gets closer to us. And our hill, I'm gonna have to say, I'm very pleased with all the awesome texture. It really creates a stunning layer separation between the background and the foreground. I learned a lot here, and I hope you guys did too and enjoyed painting with us. But we're not done. Helicopter Hill still has a little bit more history that I want to share with you, so back to Helicopter Hill. Now, what happened to Helicopter Hill? Well, unfortunately, it's just a distant memory. There is no history. In fact, I reached out to the Historical Society of San Juan Capistrano, and they don't know anything about it, which is weird because there's a trail named after it. If I had to take a guess, I would imagine that obviously it was decommissioned in 1945 after World War II had ended, and there's no need for it anymore. The surrounding land was sold off to San Juan Capistrano, San Clemente, Dana Point, Laguna Beach, and all those places around here to build homes. And that's what it is today. It's just a suburbia. However, what makes Helicopter Hill so unique is there's nothing around it in this particular spot, and you get breathtaking panoramic views that you get to see here. And that's what makes this location so awesome. Even though it's surrounded by country clubs and homes and actual real historical sites that are still here, like the Mission, this little place is really unique to its own. It's got a really interesting piece of history that has been lost to most of the residents here. But I wanted to share it with you because I just think it's so unique. And the fact that you get a view like this is worth the hike. All right, well, we had a little bit of a whoopsie doodle. What happened?
The propeller broke on the drone.
Ollie broke my propeller. So, oh wait, no, it's that one. Yeah, see, no good. What do you have to say about yourself?
I didn't do it this time.
Oh, that's right, it was me. Don't say I don't do anything for the community to get awesome footage. I think we had a good adventure.
Yeah.
Where should we go next?
We are going to the mountains.
We'll see. Tune in next time when we don't go to the mountains. Bye.